Hi folks, yes, it's raining. It's a lot of fun. Liquid sunshine, who could beat that? And you're watching On the Scales, weighing in with Model Railroaders. I'm John Weeks, my co-host Trudy Terrell, and our guest host, John
Bridges.
So we're going to look at his model railroad. It's inside. It's kind of small, but then again it's kind of big. It's O scale and ON3 scale, and it's amazing, folks. So let's head on inside, get out of this liquid sunshine, and dry out a little bit and enjoy some train riding. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Trudy Terrell here, and I'm with my guest, John Bridges, and he built this amazing structure here with a little help from his wife. So, John, first of all, let's get started. What's the name of your railroad?
Yeah, it's replicating the Denver and Rio Grande Western, particularly the part in northwest Colorado around Ridgeway where it connected with the Rio Grande Southern.
Okay, do you have many awards you've received, I understand. Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, I've done contest models for the O-Scale West National Model Railroad Convention in Santa Clara. They've been having that for 25 years, and so some of these structures and some of the trains have won awards there most of those years.
Okay, tell us about the backdrops, the beautiful paintings. Did you do those yourself, or did you have somebody come in and do those professionally, or tell us about that?
Yeah, I planned on doing it all myself. My wife had been kind of out of the model railroad deal for a few years, and when I started in this room, she realized it was a clean enough room that she could come in here and do something. She said she'd like to try doing some of the backdrops, so I could show you 3 or 4 of the spots, but she did the parts of the backdrop that people really like, and the rest I did. So
it's beautiful work.
It's nice for her to do something on it too.
Have you always been interested in railroads?
Yeah, actually, my grandfather was a locomotive engineer in the Middle West before I was born, and up until I was about 10, he retired and then died. But my dad had been a train nut and didn't have a train set because he was in the Depression when he was a kid, and he was the oldest of 9 kids. And so as soon as I came along, that was his excuse to get me a Lionel train that was really his, I think. And so I did Lionel trains until I was probably 12 or 13, had a lot of that stuff, and then I started with HO. And I did HO until 1981, and I switched to O-Scale and ON3, which is what this is. So it's a bigger size where physically you can work on it more, build things, and see the detail that you put on. So this is a pretty nice size to work with.
Did you do this all yourself, or did you have help building it? And did you use a kit to do some of this, or is it all handmade by you?
A lot of the cars are kit-built wood kits, board-on-board, scale lumber, and then painted and weathered and decaled, mostly by me. And a lot of the structures are kit-built, and a lot of them are scratch-built, like the stamp mill behind us, the whole mill complex. I built that, and I built an overhead ore tram to bring the ore from the one mine to the mill, and a trestle from the other mine to the same stamp mill. And so a lot of it I had to build, and a lot of it I built for fun. And
how many years have you been working on this, John?
In this room, I believe about 12 years, and in this house they had a previous layout that never got finished because it wasn't as clean a room as this, and between the two it's been since about 1983 or 4.
So it seems like your interest is both in mining in the local area and the trains. So have you always had this desire to to build things like this for a hobby, or do you have other people come in to appreciate the beautiful things that you've done here? You know, do you have open houses for folks to come in and see this, or do you make appointments, and do you do that often? And do you go to other places to see what they've done? Where did you get all your
That's
ideas?
a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been going to that big meet in the Bay Area for 25 years, and they usually have about 20 layouts open around the Bay Area, maybe 10 on the peninsula, 10 in the East Bay. And so I've been to a lot of train layouts in my life, and I mean, several that I really liked, and a bunch I wasn't too crazy about, but I've learned from other people, and a couple of great modelers that I knew down there. And I have my layout open with that meet in Santa Clara, so we're 3.5, 4 hours away, and a normal person wouldn't think of spending the gas to drive 4 hours to see a silly train layout, but a train nut would. So I've had, last year I had people from New Zealand that came. They flew to San Jose for the train meet and rented a car and drove all the way up here to see mine.
Oh,
the year
what an honor.
year before, somebody from Australia. So, and I have it open with that meet. The last 7 or 8 years, I have it open with the O-Scale West, and this year, the National Narrow Gauge Convention is in Sacramento. It'll be open with that. So, you know, I can't fit too many people in here, but I've had a lot of people, and people with good layouts from other places come, and curious local people come. So
well, with your grandfather and your father, it sounds like it's in your blood. What's the most tedious part of building this that you ran into?
Well, the hardest part right now is eventually you get old enough, the climbing underneath and around and around is more difficult, and even wiring. This layout isn't that complex wiring wise, but it just, Murphy's Law is that things aren't always as easy as you thought they were going to be, and little things can come up, you know. So the easy part for me used to be the building the trains and the structures, and that gets more difficult over time too. But
I see you have a lot of things underneath. Are you planning on expanding this even more if you had more room, John, or is this it?
well, I'm working on a little logging line that doesn't hardly fit in here, but in addition to the narrow gauge and the standard gauge with coal trains and freight trains and such, I'm going to have a little bit of a logging, but I can't really fit anything more in here. You could take the trains off and put different type trains on, like I have little mining trains, and I've got a couple of locomotives and cars that I'm going to pretty soon decal for Mexican Railroad. So yeah, I've got a lot of different types of trains that could be run, but they can't all run at the same time.
Yeah.
This is a LaBelle wood kit for a Denver and Rio Grande motor car, like a one-car self-propelled passenger train. So that's a kind of an interesting piece.
And you see all the people in there. They're really enjoying their little trip, huh?
Yeah, it's got lights and people in it.
Yeah, that's nice. And now, did you acquire do you go to different locations to get some of these things, or how did you acquire like something like this, John?
Well, I'm always looking for certain things. Like in the structure department, there were buildings that I saw in somebody else's layout 20 years ago that I would like to have, and if I ever come across that kit. In fact, the best of the stone or brick type buildings that have ever been put out, they were done by a guy named Thomas York, and he's done HO and O scale structures, a lot of them over the years, and he just does the best work on the hand carving, the masters, for whether it's random stone or brick or whatever. And I've got now, I guess, about 10 of his buildings, but I did one of his buildings for a contest 25 years ago, and he happened to come out from back east. He was an artist for Disney.
Oh, wow.
And as a sideline, he started doing these building kits, and they were always more expensive than other building kits. And so I had one or two of them, but I liked a lot of them. And he came out to the meet, and I did one of his structures for the contest that year. So I met him at the show, and he appreciated me doing his building. And I said, I always wished that I could afford more of them. And he said, I'll give you a deal if you can get a hold of me, because he might be at Disney in France or Japan or here. And he said, if you can get a hold of me, and I still have the masters, I'll build the walls for you for any of the old buildings for half price, for the old price.
Oh, how
and then
nice.
you just have to do your own details for the building.
Yeah.
And so I ended up coming across 3 or 4 more of his buildings that way.
Well, your passion for this is quite evident, and I really appreciate what you've done and that you're sharing this with the rest of the world. And we shared earlier that you had 10 grandchildren. I have 7, 6 of whom are boys, and they would just love this, because I can't tell you how many times I've read Thomas the Train to our 6 grandsons, and I understand you are familiar with that too. So this is just exquisite, and I thank you for sharing this with us, John. Is there anything else you'd like to, point out or share with us about what you're...
No, I appreciate you coming and asking too, and I guess all I would say is it's replicating Colorado, and I'd say 1960, late steam, still have steam locomotives and early diesels, but I like that time period, and I like that time in my life too.
What were you doing at that time in your life?
Before I went in the military.
Oh, okay.
So, just a more innocent time and a good time for railroads and train watching.
Did you ever try to get on, be a conductor on a railroad train yourself, or an engineer, or any of those fun things that trained people do? Well,
2 funny things. I always thought it would be the greatest job to be a locomotive engineer. And I've known people that did have that job, and it's probably not the greatest because you're on the road a lot, and a diesel engineer is not as much fun, or it's different than the romance of a steam engine.
Yeah.
But anyway, I tried, when I got out of the service, I tried to get on with Santa Fe once in California, and they said you're overeducated, meaning if you can do anything else, you might end up leaving, so they didn't want me. And then after the service, I was actually in Eastern Ohio and trying to get electronics jobs, but before I could get a job, I decided to go down to the Penn Central yard, and they happened to have a guy there that was interviewing, and he called me a week later and offered me a job as a locomotive fireman, what I always wanted to be, which would become an engineer.
Yeah.
And I turned it down, the job I always wanted, because I had started with a department store as a manager selling electronic stuff about 2 weeks before, and I didn't want to quit their job right after I took it.
Yeah.
So I turned down the job I always wanted. So
what did you do in the
funny.
military, John?
I was in underwater demolition for a year, and then Beachmaster Unit 1, the guys that do lifeguarding and communication for amphibious landings.
Oh, wow.
Vietnam
How
time.
interesting. Well, I thank you very much for this time that you spent with us today, and I appreciate what you've done, and thank you for what you do and what you share with the rest of the world, and have a wonderful, blessed day.
Thank you.
Okay.
tunnel entrance, and this is a miner's belt. And in the shop I'll show you the hat and that kind of stuff. These are the mucking boots. And I've got some drills in there. This is a hard rock drill. This ore cart, I did the dimensions I wanted and put it together. And I found the pattern block for the little tag that says Miners Foundry, Nevada City, and cleaned that up and had Grass Valley Steelcast run it. And 5 of the 6 little tags came out good enough to use on a car or something after 70 years later. This is quartz with a little gold in it. That's from up near the little town of Washington. It's a rock hammer and a chisel. This little engine here is a Kohler 4-cylinder engine that I mounted on a little frame so you can push it on the track. And the idea is like on the farm, if you know how they used to do a hit and miss engine where you could do your clothes over here and do your grain over there or something. So if you pull the engine down here, then with the flat belt it'll run. This is an air compressor for the drill, and this is a pump to pump the water out of the mine. So you could run both of those things with the engine over here, and then if you push the engine down here, it'll run this little jaw crusher, which will break the rock anything about this size or a little less. It would break it down to 1.5 inch size, which is what you want for a stamp mill. And where the gold usually is in these kind of crevices like this in the quartz. Then this is a little stamp battery, 2-stamp battery that I built. And you can run that off of the same flat belt there with the engine over here. This is just workbench. Sorry the weather isn't very good, but that's a little real early drill press and early vise, and just some tools and things being worked on there. This is a little forge where you can rework your tools, straighten your tools out, and this anvil is made out of a piece of railroad track, obviously. I don't know if you can see in here, but this on the left is an assay bench, and I've got a little furnace there and some samples, and then a lot of kind of interesting old tools on the other side.
So how long have you been collecting this stuff?
Probably I've been going to Colorado whenever I can and climbing around mine sites there where there's a lot more stuff still there, probably about since the early 80s.
Ah, good. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Here we are again, folks. We're still on the scales, weighing in with model railroaders, John here, and he's given us a tour of his Denver Rio Grande layout. It's fashioned after the railroad that operated in Colorado, Of course, standard gauge, which would be the O here, and narrow gauge, which would be the ON3 here. And it's an amazing thing what you can do in a limited space. I would like to call this the biggest little railroad that we've seen so far. It's amazing, and we hope you enjoyed the show. We enjoyed doing it. Thank you again, John Briggs, for allowing us to come into your home.
Thank you.
And experience what you've done here over the years. And Trudy, say
And
something.
I would like to thank Vern, our cameraman, and Kent, our editor. And thank you, John Bridges, and John Weeks for...
Outside.
What? Oh, yes, and the mining outside. Thank you for sharing what you did. I mean, it's incredible that you did all of this inside. Then you filmed, then you built everything outside, including a mine shaft. It's wonderful. You're just a multi-talented young man, and we're very glad to have met you and had the opportunity to share this with the rest of the people that will be watching this show. Thank you very much, John Bridges.
Thank you.
And thank your wife for her beautiful paintings in here.
I will.
Okay. Bye.